Let's talk about copyright violations. First of all, you know, they say stealing information from one person is plagiarism. Stealing from a lot of people is called research. So that's what we're doing. All right, so what does it take to get a patent? What do you think? Any idea what's that?
You gotta apply for that.
You got to apply for it. Okay. What else do you have to do to get a patent?
Research.
You start with research. You have to do a product search. You got to make sure nobody else has patented somebody that's like this. So you got to make sure that it's novel, that it's something that's completely new. You got to be able to explain, draw diagrams, perhaps even build a prototype. And then you've got to put in the application that has all the technical specs and the legal specs and all of that. Your construction method sometimes is what you got to put in there. And then, of course, you got to pay the patent fee of $1,347 to get your patent. Okay, what does it take to get a copyright on your work?
You have to fill out, we had to do that for one of our businesses. But you have to do the same thing, you have to do the research and everything, and then you have to pay a fee. And
it was very surprising to me whenever I started that to figure out that anything you write is automatically copyrighted.
Wow.
There are no fees, there are no applications. If you post something on your Facebook page, that is your copyrighted information. Now, I don't mean if you steal somebody else's stuff and post it on there. I'm talking about it if you write this long post or something on there, that is your information. That's your intellectual property. So if you've got a blog, if you make a music video and put it on YouTube, that it is automatically copyrighted as soon as you write it. Okay? So with that in mind, what can you use of other people's creations?
Well, you have to get permission.
Okay, outstanding, because that's their property. And so generally, you get someone's permission in order to be able to use something. So, and generally you also credit with it on there. So ideally, you want to get permission on there if, you know, say there's a book that you want to use. At our last church, I developed a personal work curriculum based on the book, Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And so I wrote to their estate and asked, can I teach this class on there? So that's ideal on there. So, what are exceptions to it? Are there exceptions? Since I asked this question, the answer is
Well, I guess
yes.
it depends on what it is, but you had mentioned it also is giving them the credit.
Okay, first of all, you have to credit them.
So like when you do it, like I remember in graduate school doing research papers, you had to do footnotes, there's other stuff now, but you had to say this is person who said it, make the quotes, and
Okay.
so depending on what you're trying to get
Okay.
used.
Some works have in the foreword or whatever that you can only use a certain percentage or amount of that
Okay.
work.
We're gonna get there.
And that's only in reviewing or quoting or whatever.
Right, and that's correct. Also, have you heard public domain?
Yes.
Okay. So what's in the public domain? Old stuff, right? All right, so everything is copyrighted as soon as you write it, at least after January 1st of 1978. That was whenever this came about. It is copyrighted to a term equal, I want to get this right, because otherwise Vanessa's going to yell at me, for a term equaling the life of the author plus 70 years after their death. So after that, it's public domain. Okay? Do you ever wonder why King James Bibles are so much cheaper than a lot of the other Bibles? When was it written? 1611. Okay, it's public domain. Anybody can use or quote a King James Bible, whereas some of the newer translations are still copyrighted. And so you have to get their permission and things like that. Perry, when I started teaching, gave me these detailed instructions on how you cite the different versions. He gave me a block to use for New King James that you put. That as soon as he left, I don't think anybody ever did again. But that's what you are supposed to have. If you use NIV or New King James, there's a little block down at the bottom of the slide that you put. And sometimes, it'll say used with permission or, things like that. But you put that on there. Okay. There's a lot of stuff that is like government produced that's in the public domain, like pictures of Mars that NASA posts and things like that. They're automatically in the public domain. So the main thing is just check your source and make sure. It'll usually tell you what the rules are. So what's copyrighted. It's got to be something tangible. That doesn't mean it's got to be a hard copy or something, but it's got to be captured in some kind of a format on there. But you can't copyright facts. That a fact is a fact. you can use that. But generally you'll quote the source of that fact. I got it from the U.S. Department of Labor or something like that to tell what it is. So but things in the public domain you can use all you want. That's why a lot of times teachers in high school will use really, really old books that they have you read because they can use those. That you can even photocopy those and distribute them to your students and things like that. You can do that for free. Okay, but now let's talk about fair use. Fair use gives you a little bit more flexibility than perhaps some other people. There are things that you can do without the permission of the author, as Denise referred to earlier. But it's not everything. You can't steal it and just say, oh, okay, well, this is fair use. There are still guidelines, but you do have a lot of flexibility as an educator. So this is what it says. You can use things without paying fees or things like that for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, and one of them I put in red is teaching. So that gives you some flexibility that you can do without violating the copyright. Okay, so far? Okay. If I venture into dangerous territory and it doesn't take too long for me to get out of my depth, then you reel me back in.
You're using your expert in the class.
I'm using an expert in the class. There you go. All right, so there are some factors that you use to determine it. So the type of work that it is, what kind of thing that it is that you're using has an effect on it, and how much you're using as compared to the whole. So in other words, am I just quoting a paragraph out of a novel? Or am I photocopying the novel and giving it to my students? There's a big difference between those two. And then the effect upon the potential market or the value. In other words, are you costing that person money? So an example, what is David teaching in the auditorium class? On the Holy Spirit. And what is his source of his information? Okay. He was up front and said it's coming out of this book, and I've done that before too, and said the information comes out of this book. Okay. If he photocopied that book and gave it out to everybody, would that cost the author money?
Yes, it would.
Okay. So that's why he had you buy the book if you wanted to have a copy of it. He didn't just hand it out for free. Because that's increasing the author's bottom line. Like, oh, absolutely. If you're going to ask them to go buy my book or make it available, that's great. You're giving them free publicity on this. But if you use their work without any compensation, now then you're costing them money. And that's one of the biggest things on here is costing money. Which company do you hear about the most that prosecutes things like this?
Disney.
Disney. Okay. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
They do.
I mean, even down to like, painting a mural of Winnie
Right.
the Pooh on a school wall.
Or showing their movies even.
Or particularly showing their movies. Because if I show a movie, a Disney movie, to my 35 students, now then they didn't have to buy it. And so that's something that you gotta be very careful of. Yes.
It extends even further than that. For instance, the Knights for Christ can't use Knights in their name because UCF said that was an infringement upon, so they'll be known as the previously known Knights for Christ. Again, getting into the same thing we're talking about.
So the idea is that you're not just using that word and teaching it as your own information. It should be transformative. In other words, I'm going to take quotes from these 3 different books and I'm going to write something new now based on those 3 quotes. It's like, you see, this author said this author said this. So now then, with that in mind, I'm going to use this in my class and say, okay, what's your opinion? You heard these 3 different things from these 3 different authors. So now then tell me what you think about this subject based on what you heard. So that's kind of transformative on there. So, how is it used? It has to be transformative. You've got to change the intent in some way or apply it in some new way in order for it to be fair use. So, you need to be able to credit your sources, first of all, even if it's fair use, you still tell where you got them from. And if you've noticed, sometimes when somebody uses a picture, like in a slideshow, it'll have down at the bottom the website that it came from. Some websites will tell you, you're free to use any of this information on there. I had a photographer that was a friend of mine take some pictures, and he gave me a CD of the pictures, and it says on there copyright released. So in other words, you can print these, you can copy these, you can give these away. I'm releasing my copyright for these.
Hey, Joe, I've got a question for you. Where does AI generated content fall into this?
I'm going to refer to Vanessa.
That's a big fight right now.
Yeah, intellectual property and AI is all still so new. Courts have not really decided what law is going to be in that, so it's in flux. And I guess you have to really do something egregious to get on the radar of somebody saying, okay, we're going to sue you.
Well, honestly, like, with us, we try to avoid that. I'm building a course right now for the state on ed leadership, which I don't have my ed leadership, but I'm an online instructional designer, so like they give you the content. And these are people from the state and a committee that gave me the content for me to build your course. And some of their sources, they need your presentation because some of their sources
Are very.
I clicked on a hyperlink and it was completely a chat box. And it was like GPT and it just started like AI going crazy. I'm like, how am I, and I'm an English major, how am I supposed to cite this? So like, I was like, I can't move forward until I know how to cite this. And finally my boss said, there's absolutely no way we can use that. Because a lot of times AI is not supposed to be opinionated, but it is. And so the information is just not even accurate to begin with.
Right. I was going to say, you can't even assume that it's accurate.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems like it gives you what you want to hear,
Yeah.
rather than
I
what.
think it probably does. An
Because
algorithm or something.
you may have asked it, okay, write me a paper advocating for recycling of plastics or something. So that's what it's going to give you. Is just that side of it. It's biased because you asked it to be biased. But sometimes even if you don't, there's depending on the sources it draws from, nothing you write is completely without bias. You still have your own thoughts and opinions as you're writing stuff.
Right. One thing that AI we use, like for instance, for graphics. Sometimes if you need a graphic, if you're doing a PowerPoint, something like that, and you want some original graphics, you're probably pretty safe using AI for that because you can get graphics that haven't existed before.
But then, like he said, just cite that, it's AI generated, so that And maybe the source that you use, ChatGPT or Gemini or whoever you use to source that AI content.
Yeah, it's getting into the same problem. Sometimes my students, I would ask them to give me a source on a paper that they wrote, and they would put Google. Google is not a source. Google helps you find a source.
They do their research in Google.
But we're starting into the same thing now with ChatGPI. ChatGPI is not a source per se, it just pulled from other sources. Yes.
That's kind of like at school, they tell us don't use Wikipedia as a source.
Yes.
Because it's a daily thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because people can edit.
You can edit.
Right.
Yeah,
And so,
But it's a good jump off. It'll help you
Yeah.
find sources.
yes, you
yes.
use it to figure out where to go look now.
And
Yeah.
it's definitely a
Yeah.
source and a search engine, you know, like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the point I was trying to make. The search engine helps you find a source, and Wikipedia at the end is gonna have a list of references. And so, yes, you can't use Wikipedia, but you can find those references that it used, and you can look at those and you can add. So, you know, just because something is on the internet doesn't make it public domain. So, and it's easy for all of us to forget that sometimes. Oh, this is a perfect diagram that I want to use. And to be honest, you can probably get by with it in a small group setting and everything, but you definitely wouldn't want to do that and then publish it on the internet and it's like, oh, look at my great diagram that I came up with.
One of the things you have to be aware of, like for instance, in the auditorium, we're streaming that. Okay, so
Yeah.
so
Good point.
whoever's teaching in the auditorium has to be even more aware of that because that. Whereas in here, you might get away with something because it's not going outside this room more than likely.
But it is for the latest class, cause we do Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
There you
again,
go.
you know that internet.
But as soon as it's not being recorded, is what I mean, like as soon as they are enclosed,
That's
it's
exactly
not,
right.
it's
Yeah.
not
It's not
recorded.
being
And
recorded.
then
That's
the
true.
third
Most of us
is-
aren't in the auditorium,
That's
that's the
Yeah.
positive.
Sure, but I'm just saying to be aware that in this day and time,
Mhm.
your content may find its way. Someone will turn around and say, "Oh, that was a really good class. Let me post that to my Facebook page." And now it's got much wider exposure.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now, what about photocopying songs out of the songbook and passing those around for us to sing in the ladies' class?
We have a copyright,
Right.
Okay.
From
We
the
have a
church
number
though,
for that,
so that's how we
so-
do it.
and we know because last two leaders would not allow us to even do that, just make copies out of the book, we have to show and prove that we have that CCL license.
Right.
That's an expense that we pay.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
And I think you'll see it on the bottom of the slides as they're
Yeah.
going, it'll talk about the, remember if it has the CCLI or
Yeah.
what it has.
Mhm.
And buying the paperless hymnal comes with that right, but there are still limits to it.
Right.
It will give you the right to use them in your church, but not the live stream.
Right,
So you gotta pay a new fee
right.
in order to be able to live stream and show those slides. Okay, so it really comes down to a couple of questions here. First of all, how did you use the work and what did you take? So if it was transformative, if you used it as the basis for your own thoughts, then that gives you some flexibility on using it for fair use. And how much of it did you take? A lot of times 10% is kind of a guideline, which 10% of a novel is a lot of information. And so, for something like that, the author might want a lower level than that. But in general, 10% is kind of a rule of thumb, I guess, that you can use for fair use. And remember, this is just because it's for educational use. You can't do it, to write your own book and then go and publish it and have sources that you didn't credit or you didn't get permission from or things like that. Okay, so, and one of the big things is, did you cause any financial harm to anybody? Because that's what it comes down to for a lot of people. It's use my stuff, you gotta pay me.
Yeah.
And that's fair. I mean, if you write your own song and you perform it and you publish it on the internet and then people pick it up and, pass it around and, whereas you were trying to have people pay to download it. Now then people download it and pass it around to everybody else. This was a big thing for like games, 20 years ago or so. you'd have the big sharing sites where somebody would pay for a game and then publish it for everybody. And now then that person's not getting the money that they earned by distributing their intellectual property. Okay, and part of it was, did you do this in good faith? You know, was this your intent? It might not turn out the way that you intended for it to. Maybe you used something in a class and somebody was streaming it and you didn't even know that they were streaming it. And so, you know, I used this in good faith in my own personal setting here, but somehow it got out into the world that I didn't mean for it to. Okay, so here's some points on here. All the different kinds of media are affected, but so you just have to look carefully at the place you're getting them from and see, did they release the rights to it or not? Mostly we're concerned with school or educational settings here. So that definitely gives you much more flexibility than in other settings you're using it for anything that is going to be separately copyrighted. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
Where would you find if they release rates?
Generally, it's going to be on the website if that's what you're
On the
looking
website,
for. So
okay.
just read on there, and sometimes you'll search for free or non-copyrighted pictures or something,
Got it.
but you still have to look.
Right.
But just because you searched for that doesn't mean that's what you got. And so still check the website, and sometimes it'll be pictures and it will say on there, people are free to use these however they want. And sometimes it does not. And sometimes you see people use an image and it'll have words across it. It's a stock
Right.
image or something, you know. It's easy to tell.
Anyway.
But I've seen
The
in,
watermark.
in school yearbooks, somebody gives them a senior picture that has the little banner across it. Okay, that's pretty brazen. But there's a rule of proportionality. So, you know, only take the bare minimum that you need to accomplish your objective. You know, don't quote a whole chapter if a paragraph will do. And so that's part of the guideline, is just use the minimum amount that you can get by with if you're doing it under fair use. Okay. Questions, comments?
Well, I have a question, but just to kind of add to what you just said, basically, if it's something that, like, you want a book that you want to guide you through the whole 9 weeks or however long you're teaching, if there is a site license that you can purchase, then you often can get access to be able to use more than just the 10% of the rule proportionality by purchasing the site license. Sometimes if it's a big enough class, you can go to the elders and maybe they might do the site license if it's something that's, you know, going to a large number of the body. But if you're using it for personal teaching references, you can check whether or not they have a site license that you can purchase. And then you'll be free to do what you need to do without running afoul.
You see that a lot in software too. A company will buy a site license for Windows 11 and they're gonna buy 500 copies. So I can put it on up to 500 computers with this one fee. But it's applicable in other circumstances also. Okay, anybody else? Okay, this was a fairly quick one, so it kind of got us back on schedule.
Just a comments, when we're talking about utilizing, you know, what we have, there are people, that are just idea people, and I'm not, you know, counting myself, but that's one of my things. I don't know, just come up with ideas, you know, so if people are struggling with, you know, how to do this, ideas, I may not be able to do the organization like everybody else can, but ideas. So sometimes we just need to tap into other people and just ask other people, like, what would you do for this when you're trying to teach a lesson or whatever? And then you won't even have to go down the road of trying to find, you know, a picture or a site or whatever, you know, when you kind of do that.
Yeah, and using the internet for ideas is fine. That's why it's out there.
Right, right.
So if you're like, okay, I want to teach a class on this subject, but I don't really know what kind of things to talk about, then, you know, Google search will give you millions of different references of other people that have done this. And so you look through, oh, I hadn't thought about that. But the main thing is don't plagiarize their work, but use it to spark your own imagination. It's like, oh, okay, I see that general topic. So I've even Googled before creative sermon ideas. You know, and then you go down and it's like, you know, all I may use is the title, but it's like, oh, you know, that gave me an idea for a sermon. And so then I write it myself. But definitely use it to give you ideas. Okay.
Bible Talk TV is really good too.
I forgot to mention that. That was
Yeah,
one thing I meant to talk
on
about.
my iPad. And they have quizzes now too. You can go back and like earn certificates and.
Yeah, it's on the 9:15 session 1 chart, the very last one.
Yeah, but yeah, BibleTalk.tv is one, and I think the church here might have paid for a license to be able for the members to access it.
Especially when we were having to do everything on during COVID, that was highly utilized.
And there was another site that our last church paid for a subscription to so that any of us could use it, but I don't recall the name and I wouldn't be allowed to still use it anyway. But there are sites out there like that. And a lot of them, especially dealing with Bible class lesson plans and things like that, a lot of them are free. And a lot of them, the rights are released. Just look for that and make sure before you use it. So a lot of people are just proud of their work, and especially dealing with Christianity, they're like, yeah, use this all you want. I want the word to get out there.
It's especially for kids lessons. When you're doing the Sunshine Street stuff, you can find a lot of copyright-free stuff out there for that.
Yes, definitely.
And what we have to keep in mind too with all of the websites or whatever that we go to, that we have to check even what they say against what the Word of God says.
Absolutely.
Because with that Bible Talk, I've gone through different lessons with them, and there have been things that have come up, and I'm like, that's not what the Bible says about it.
I was co-teaching with Philip on one of the ones, and we were using those as a basis. And I got to a slide on it when I was going through it. It was like, okay, Philip, I'm changing the slide.
Right.
I don't agree with what it says on it. So yeah, just because something is a Christian source, one, it doesn't mean it's accurate, and also it may be from a different denomination, and so you've got to read through things very carefully and make sure that you agree with what it's saying. If you just pull a slide or something or cut and paste some information, you may read through it more carefully, and you may not see it until you're in front of the class, and then you're like, oh wait. That is not what I tried to say.
A mature Christian can see the difference easily. I always recommend when you're going to teach a Bible, go to the Bible. Go any other place. If you need to use a picture, you can use a picture to help you see what the Bible says. Don't ever go to see the lesson that other people teach and try to bring that's laziness. And you don't know what you're going to be teaching. So it happened before with this sister, and I say never do that. She just read something that she found on the internet. And it sounds good, but when you go and read, you see it's not good at all. Use your Bible. The Bible is the best teacher we have. And we don't, and sometimes we need other brothers and sisters and talk to them. Hey, I'm teaching about this. Can you help me to understand this? Don't go outside. Don't go there. You don't know what is there.
But there's nothing wrong with reading stuff that was published by somebody who was Catholic or Jewish or something. But now then you've got to use back that level of learning of being able, of understanding or creating. You're creating your own lesson, and so you've got to evaluate their lesson as you're creating yours. And so, but if you're dealing with an Old Testament topic, a lot of times Jewish writers will give you the best information about it. They still live in that world.
I've learned so much in Dan's class too in the mornings, because he goes back into the Old Testament and then he shows like how it relates to the New Testament, and he's used like just things from like the Midrash. I didn't even know that was a thing. But he's like, this is not, he jokes, don't write this in your Bible, this is just Jewish history. But because of the Jewish history, because I am not familiar with that, like, it helps me to better understand the hand of God and all of the different workings, and, yeah, so it's good to research that stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but history is different to other people teaching.
Right.
We had to have,
But I think that gives you the base foundation knowledge of, to be like a really good teacher, to have that kind of wealth of information and.
No, that's what she's saying. History is one thing, but when you looking at some of these lessons, it's like, no.
Yeah, you always try to separate that in your mind of, what's my source on this?
Mhm.
Was it an inspired source or not an inspired
Yeah,
source?
right.
And if not inspired doesn't mean it's wrong, but it just means you can't count on it.
Right.
Yeah, double check it,
Right.
and make sure.
Again, keeping in mind, your audience may be very, in terms of their experience in the Bible knowledge. So you always want to err on the side of addressing the weakest common denominator as you prepare your material.
All right, you need a break? Okay, all right, let's come back on the hour. No PowerPoint for the next one. Give me a break. Talk about handling objections. Everybody's nightmare is class.
Yes, she's back
Question?
now.
yeah.
You can't really write that.
I know.
Girl,
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to go to the
you
other.
need to pray. Go to the elders. No, that's how it is. You need to know what the girl said. Ain't that something?
Okay, great. I figured you had been, just kind of like getting the updates, 'cause we've been praying for you guys, and,
Oh,
He's not my husband, you know that? No, my husband's Mike Kemessa. So when you came up to me, I'm not Kara. Kara's, she's red hair.
oh, she has red hair.
Yeah, Kara has red hair, but his
I'm
wife.
so sorry.
No worries. I'm Lori and my husband's Mike.
Okay, that was explaining your response initially.
Yeah, I'm like, Chris isn't mine. I have a brother named Chris, but.
Okay, I'm sorry, but thank you for letting me know. That's an area I'm not good at, is remembering to do. That's why when I send out cards, when I go to the directory and get the address, I don't like it when there's not a picture there.
Yeah, but you can know.
That way I can, oh, that's who's getting it.
And you know what? This new directory, if people have not bought into it, they're not in there. I hate this new directory. I can't find anybody in it. And then I didn't like the one we had before it because all the pictures were this big. I couldn't see them. I like the one we had when we got here. And that was it. Because you could see the pictures and they took your picture when you got here and they immediately put it in there.
That's the ones on the walls up there.
Oh, those are so But we can't. They don't have permissions. Like you have to go in and put your family's picture in, and the older people are not going to do that. I tell you right now, there's a lot of older people like.
It was really hard because Daryl and I put together a welcome bag and they were going to Carol. And, he did, it's on behalf of the whole church, so we put it together. And it's so hard just to go to the album and say, explain them up to me. So I have no idea.
But one doesn't I had no video on Sunday, so they sent me a postcard that they sent me.
At least 2 weeks, send out something.
And I told the elders, I'm not going to be here during these 2 months. I'm not going to be here on Sundays, only on Wednesday.
I think
And
it's
I'm going to be here like once a month, only once a month. During these 2 months.
Yeah, we're not going to be here. We'll be here tomorrow, but we won't be here the next week.
I will not be here tomorrow.
And you're not going to be here then, and I bet David's not going to be here because he was trying to find somebody to teach class. I don't know who else is going to be gone next week. It may just be a ghost town next week.
I'm going to be the 29th and the 6th, and then I will not be here for like 3 weeks.
Well, like the 6th, the youth will be here. That first.
Yeah, this weekend.
Are you going to be here in the middle of November? I'm just trying to figure out when to do filming.
Yeah, we need to check.
Yeah, and if we have to film it and then give it to your husband,
We hear this November. Yes, I'm going to be here 8, 10, and 17.
Okay, we're gonna be here, so we
The
can pick.
24 I will not be here.
Yeah, we're not doing anything Thanksgiving. Why don't we pick like that second Sunday? I got to know there may be something
Yeah,
else
we
going
wanna
on.
switch to Saturday because we had so many.
I don't know though, can y'all do a Saturday?
Saturday we have
Gosh, look at our calendar.
the school is not available.
Let's just do it after church one of those days, because I don't think it's gonna take that long.
The 9, going to be Saturday 9, going to be an event here, so we can.
Yeah. What is that?
It's a parenting, media thing.
Okay. Oh, Parenting Media, that's right. But
That's-
you know what? We can do it on that.
And then the 9th, I have the Spanish something.
I was thinking, I had thought about doing it the day they had the parenting thing, but y'all would be in that because I was thinking they could just bring the kids with them, but.
They're going to have kids care, I think that.
The kids-
They're going to have daycare that, for that.
Yeah, but she means the our